So I will wait. Even if we're live, like I think it's good to start letting people arrive in the virtual room of YouTube and Facebook, I guess. But maybe now is a good time to start. So welcome everyone to the 5th event of Quinzena'21. The 4 previous episodes are all available to watch on INSTITUTO's YouTube channel if you haven't watched them. They were on rewilding, housing and health, emerging practices, and communicating architecture. And today's theme is civic. We are joined by 3 people that work with this theme. First off, we have Sahra Hersi, a London-based artist who cares about people, places, art, and architecture in that order. Then we have Emma Dorothy Conley from Genomic Gastronomy, which is an artist-led think tank that examines the biotechnologies and biodiversity of food systems. She is joining us from Espinho, near Porto, where she is based. And then we have Ruben Teodoro from Collective Warehouse, who are an architecture and art collective based in Lisbon, but he is joining us from Sintra today. So without talking any further, I will let my guests have their presentations. Just to say, just before, that we will first have the presentations, which will be followed by a conversation about the theme today, and that will be moderated by myself. And I will integrate the comments or any questions that people might have on our Facebook and YouTube live chat thing. So we like getting those questions and comments, and even if we are in a virtual world, it's nice to have that interaction with the public. So yeah, Sahra, I give you the word. I said your name in Portuguese.
Okay. Well, I've prepared a very short presentation that I'll be sharing just now. Hopefully it works. Is it working?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This is where we've come. Let me put it in full screen mode. Just as Katerina was saying, caring about people, places, art and architecture in that order. I'm glad that this is now catching on. It's not been on my Instagram for a while. But I'm like, why did I do that? Mainly because I felt that I have an architectural background and I was interested in art, and I always felt that people and places came second to design and making a statement. And I think it's important to put people first, especially when people are using the spaces or they're interacting with the art. So I'm starting off with a project that I was involved with, and it's called Trio, and it's based in Waltham Forest in East London. And this project, I collaborated with the Drawing Shed, Matthew Lloyd Architects, and it was part of a competition open call that Waltham Forest Council were doing at the time for making places, and I was lucky enough to be asked to be on this competition with them. So I sort of helped to the design and did a rendering, and it was a great competition. Like, the competition was, I think, 8 places in Walthamstow where artists, architect, designers were asked to create a design for the space. And we were lucky enough that the Drawing Shed already had 10 odd years relationship with the particular site, because they'd been running a community centre garden in like a sunken garden on an estate. And if you look behind this structure, you can see the council housing, but on the other side is quite big terraced townhousey arts and crafts buildings, which which were like from a more affluent area. So it was an interesting sort of juxtaposition with the council housing, people from lower incomes and people from higher incomes. And you can see on the other side there where the other houses are as compared to the main bit of the site, which is located in a housing estate run by the council for lower income people. So it felt like a nice space where people could interact, and the idea was to create a space where it could be quite flexible to hold different events within the garden that the drawing shed had already set up. So it was great to be part of this project, just to see like what long-term involvement with the community could mean. So you build trust over years, and coming in as artists and designers and expecting to do something over a week or a month is actually really not enough. I think projects work when you've built that relationship over time, or you intend to build it over time. If it's just coming and going, I think it's a bit more questionable and needs to be a bit more thought about in a sense. And one way to make the project more thought about is to build things over time and build connections and trust over time with people. This is a project that I did with Space Studios, and this is on the back of Ilford Town Centre. I grew up in Ilford in East London on the border of Essex. So this is the town actually where I grew up, Ilford, Essex. Part of also London. It's a bit confusing, but it is part of London, but zone 5 for London. And so it was really great to be asked to do something. And they were like, do you want to do a billboard about like something you're interested in as part of like a wider project that would have become inviting other artists to do the billboard after me, and then creating a series of public events for local people. But unfortunately with Corona, this project sort of cut short with my billboard and didn't really realize the next stages. But the whole idea around this billboard was to kind of, I was thinking, what on earth should I put on the back of this, like the town hall in Ilford where I grew up? And the only thing I can think of was my home. And like, I am not somebody who represents or shows myself ever in my art. But I felt that if there was a moment for me to do that, then this would be the moment to do it. So like to represent myself and to represent like the diversity in Ilford, and to kind of like, because I felt that I knew a lot about the town, I knew a lot about the town centre, I'd seen it develop over the years. And at that moment, Ilford's now going through a lot of changes. There's a lot of regeneration, questions around gentrification, questions around like people being pushed out because of rents are increasing, people losing their jobs, you know, a lot of things were happening, and Crossrail is also coming to Ilford. So thinking about like showing that, but also being quite hopeful. And this was just before the pandemic. So I feel like, and it's still there, it's like, and it was part of the Space Studio gallery, but ironically it's become the only thing you can see of the gallery now because it's outside and nobody can go inside. But it was also about being sensitive and thinking about how do I get people to be sort of interested and wanting to kind of move a bit closer. And since then, I can't really say much about it, but this project is slowly growing into a larger project, and it's about making that initial statement and thinking about how do I connect with the community. That being severed, but then again, new opportunities sort of arising from it that I'll be exploring quite soon, but I can't say much about at the moment. This was another project where I was an artist in residence you might notice there's a theme with all my work. It's quite local to where I live. I grew up in East London on the outskirts, and a lot of my projects are where I grew up. Probably because I feel that I know those areas better, and I feel that it just feels more, for me personally anyway, it feels much like I would have something meaningful in a way to say, and I understand the context a bit more. And usually projects I get are quite short term, so I feel that if it's short term, I should just stay local. And actually that has worked for me so far for various reasons that I probably could go into for ages, but I will skip. But anyway, this project was called the Not So White House, and it was an artist residency in Barking and Dagenham. And I was at And it was run by Create London, who also run the space. And there was, I think, 6 artists in total, and I was one of them. And I was interested in the history of the White House. This isn't the White House in Washington. It's a small little house that used to be a farmhouse that was part of a lord's manor and all the kinds of things. And it's in Barking and Dagenham, where I live now, which is also close to Ilford, where I grew up. And Barking and Dagenham has a history with the BNP, which is the British National Party, and which has a reputation for being racist. And the whole borough, if you're a person of colour, is quite a scary borough to be in, and it's kind of like the elephant in the room people don't talk about. And having been an artist in residence, unfortunately, I had some very difficult conversations with the people, the public who use the White House, because it's a domestic space for artists, but it's also a public space for local people. So loads of people come and everyone has various views. So you can end up having very uncomfortable conversations. And I did have some very uncomfortable conversations, and I was thinking, why am I doing this residency? And what does this mean? And should I leave the residency? Because I don't want to be asked about, like, are Muslims planning to kill everyone? Like, that's one question that I had while I was there. Or like things around, oh, why are Black people so angry? And I'm like, why should I be answering these questions? That's not why I'm here at the White House. So it was either leave or talk to the curators or talk to people running the program. And they were very supportive, actually. They were like, the problem wasn't really coming from them, because I think there's a lot of romanticization around working with the public. Like, oh, you're working with the public, it's great work, but actually the public come in various forms and various beliefs, and you may not agree with those beliefs. So you're going to be exposed to things that you don't necessarily want to be exposed to, or are quite violent or scary at times. So it's like, how do I deal with that? I didn't feel threatened, but I felt uncomfortable, and I felt, the only way I could say is disrespected, basically, at moments, but not by everyone. So the idea, the Not So White House, came about looking into the borough's history and finding out, like, what people of colour had contributed, finding out that Gandhi had lived in Barking and Dagenham for a short while in a community centre close by to the building, and then thinking about, like, what could we do around, like, this space, and asking people to, like, doing the research, but then ending up making quite a simple gesture. And the gesture became that I made some colouring in, like, sheets. People came in and they got to colour in the White House. And then at the back was like, what should we rename the White House? Why is it called the White House? You know, because at the time Trump was president of America. When people thought the White House, they thought of Trump, who's a bigoted man. And it's like, how do we reclaim this, and how do we reclaim things and get people to gather around a table and have a conversation and think about these issues, but not in a heated way, but through creativity and art, and then start to ask those bigger questions. And this is another project that I did with an artist who I collaborate with a lot, Rosalie Schweiker, and we were asked to work with Dulwich Picture Gallery, which is actually further away from where I live in South London, but closer to where Rosalie lives. A lot of people might say London, like, what's the difference? It's just one city, but London's actually, if you've lived in London, it's, I would say, many villages, you know. I think once someone said London is just a series of many villages, and all of them have, like, different identities and feelings to them. So for me, being on the other side was like, it's a bit alien. And to be honest, before this project, I had never been to Dulwich Picture Gallery. And we were asked to create a resource for families who don't necessarily engage with the gallery, and to run a series of workshops to get people who don't necessarily come to the gallery to engage with it. So when they say people who don't necessarily come to the gallery, they mean people of colour, they mean working class people, because Dulwich is an incredibly affluent area, and especially Dulwich Village, where this gallery is. And then we will have the conversation, why don't people come to the gallery? One is it costs £8 to get into the gallery, and then it costs extra money to see the rolling exhibition. And then it's like, there's loads of questions around, what do you feel comfortable around? Like, what, and then asking people, doing a series of tasks with some families who were taking part of our workshop in order to develop this resource. And the resource just became a simple printed guide. Children and families could go around the gallery and use as kind of a tool to like navigate this very, I think, prestigious, maybe sometimes intimidating feeling space if you don't go to that space. I certainly felt intimidated when I first went there because I was like, I've never been here, and the art doesn't actually speak to me because I'm not really into very old style portraits of old, very privileged white men and people naked, like surrounded by shells. That's not what I was interested in, but it's like getting people to think about that and ask these questions and like start to see themselves in the gallery and asking the families to create portraits of themselves and having this moment of like the juxtaposition of the portraits the children made against the portraits that, you know, these very famous oldie artists made, and then like allowing them to sort of take over and claim the gallery. And the whole project was called Making an Impression. So it's the idea of making an impression on the families and importantly making an impression on the gallery. And then the resource also has a free ticket in it, so it'll be sent to families locally who are from I'd say less affluent boroughs or surrounding areas that don't necessarily engage with the gallery to come. So for us, it was like there has to be a free ticket. There has to be like the accessibility is not just about families having access to the grounds, because the grounds is free, but then the gallery is not free. So there needs to be a free ticket. And they were very happy with that. And every resource got a free ticket, and all the families, obviously, who took part in the workshop got free access to the gallery, and all the materials was free for them. And we were just trying to think about what can we provide for the families that wouldn't mean that we take up all of their time, because I think a lot of the time when you're an artist and you work with communities, it's very easy to kind of take people's time for granted, but people's time is important. We should respect their time. So trying to think about what can we give about making sure there's free meals, they get free access to things, and, you know, it's like we trying to have that exchange and being quite clear about that. And this is another project at the ICA in London. I worked with Hiba Lamara from One of My Kind, who's an a zine run by Muslim women, and other women also contribute to it. We were asked to work with the ICA, and the ICA at the time were doing a project with a group of refugees. And we were asked to do like a several days workshop with them to create something, like the brief was like to create something. So we thought that they could create a zine and learn about like riser printing, because I'm also involved in Rabbit's Road Press, which is actually run by UNC. This might sound very confusing, but I'm sure you'll get it if you look this project up. But so we thought about how can we ask people to talk about their journeys, or think about like how they came to and really and ask them in quite simple ways to kind of respect them as refugees, because I come from a family of refugees, so I have like an understanding. So does the other artist I was working with. She also had family members who were refugees, so we had that kind of personal kind of understanding of the situation of being a refugee. So for us, we talked to the refugee charity, and we said to them that it was particularly important to me that the zine or whatever they write can be in whichever language they want. It doesn't necessarily have to be in English. And I was surprised that there was some pushback from some of the ladies who are working with the refugee, the volunteer ladies. They're like, no, they have to write in English. And I'm like, no, they don't have to write in English. You know, English is not the only language in the world. Sorry about that. English is not the only language in the world. And I don't know why that keeps happening. Has that gone? Can you still see my screen? Okay, so English is not the only language in the world, so they were allowed to write in whichever language they found fit and they wanted to, so they could feel as comfortable as possible. But if they wanted to write in English, that was fine as well. So, so they made this zine, and the curator, Ifani, at the time with ICA was super supportive, and we all had a meal together at the end of every workshop. So it was like quite a nice bonding experience, and really thinking about making sure that they felt as comfortable as possible, and they would share whatever they felt comfortable in sharing, because we know as well, being a refugee, there is a lot of trauma. There is a lot of, like, with the Home Office, it can be quite difficult, like what you say. There's a lot of self-censorship, but there's, so we wanted to respect their stories, so they only told us as much as they wanted, and we tried to make that as clear as possible. And it wasn't just about us extracting stories from refugees, so we could plaster it all over the place. And this is a summer school that I've been running for 3 years, but not the past pandemic year, because I just couldn't do it online. I couldn't bring myself to do an online school. But this school is called Making Happy Places, and it's for kids who are underrepresented in architecture from ages 15 to 19 to come and learn basic skills like model making, drawing, and thinking about, for me, it's important to see a more diverse future architects, basically. So I set up this school at Rabbits Road Press, initially with someone called Laura Owen, but she went off to do other great things. But I continued it on to make sure that, for me, I think the reason a lot of people, I think we need to get more diversity in architecture, but I think the diversity has been sort of cut off earlier on, like GCSE level, like the ages of 15 and 14, when you're thinking about what you're going to be, your future self. And I think that's when the cut-off point sort of happened. So the whole premise around this school is to try to step in before them and get them the connections that they may not necessarily have. So this school, we asked speakers to come in. Actually, Joseph Henry's in this picture, who is from the GLA, the Greater London Authority, and just to talk to them about, like, planning, other career alternatives and architectural education could get you, because it's such a broad and, in a way, like, great education that you can go into many fields, to make that clearer to them from the start. And afterwards, they would have connections to work experience. So they would go and work for 3 days, not like a terrible amount of, like, a huge amount of time, but they would work and sort of shadow an architect and do some work, do some drawings. And I speak with the practices to make sure that they're not in a corner just doing, like, making a model that we throw away afterwards, because that's what happens with work experience kids. So I'm trying to make sure that they make a meaningful contribution. And then they also would have, like, a little yearbook that we make at the end that they all get to keep and use for their portfolios if they want to go into college or teach. So really thinking about, like, what is the exchange? The school is completely free, and it was part funded by Create London, part funded by another summer school run by the typographist, the graphic designer, I should say, Fraser Mugridge. So some of the money he used to rent this space would go to run this summer school, and then Create London would do a part funding of it. And we also get, like, a volunteer who's an architecture student, but I make sure that they're paid as well. So making sure that everybody's time and everybody gets something out of it. And it's like the exchange is very clear. And I think that's really important. And basically, I realized that it's really hard to change the world and change institutions, but what you can do is to try to make small changes with every project that you do, like small positive changes. That's what I try to do, because I think otherwise it would just be too maddening, because I don't think there's ever been any institution that I've worked with that I've agreed with 100%, and it's all been hunky. There's always been a problem, but just to make sure what's important, if I'm working with the public, it's very important that the public, or the people who are less, who have the least amount of power, but actually whose tax money is paying for these institutions to function, or whose, like, time and energy, their numbers are paying for these institutions to function, they get the most out of it as well. And I think the onus is on the institution, but it's also on the artist or the designer who works with people to make sure that it's not just, the project is not just, if you work with people, because not all artists and designers do, that's fine, but if you work with people, I think it's very important that you think about, where is that exchange? Are you using those people to further your own agenda? And if you are, that's fine, but what are the people getting out of it? To be clear from the beginning, like where the balance is, basically. and making those positive changes as you go, like small things, and slowly building up and seeing how far you can go. And I guess that's where I'm going to end it.
Super. That's a nice, important message to end on. And we can talk about it later. And now we have Emma.
Hello. Let's see. If I can go share my screen. Okay. Can you see this okay? Loading for me still. There we go. All right. Thank you, Sahra. That was, I really understood a lot of your points from a personal experience in doing projects. And actually some of them I might try to reiterate because they're things that we deal with in the studio a lot as well. Things like working with institutions and also managing so much art funding and culture funding is this kind of short-term fly in, do a thing, fly out, and how do you work within that and try to make something that's also impactful is a struggle that we are constantly always having. So thank you. And thanks, Catarina, for inviting me. I have lived in Portugal for about 4 years, but I've done very few projects and presentations and stuff here because I'm always flying in, flying out. So it's exciting to participate in Quinzena' and something that is based here in Portugal. So thank you, and to INSTITUTO also. So my name is Emma Conley. I'm going to give a talk here called Food Cart as Interface, Designing for Human Food System Interactions. And I am a member of the Center for Genomic Gastronomy, which is an artist-led think tank that examines the biotechnologies and biodiversity of human food systems. And so we have also a mission. Our mission is to map food controversies, prototype alternative culinary futures, and imagine a more just, biodiverse, and beautiful food system. And so I was excited to be invited to this CIVIC session because we don't usually talk about our work specifically as civic or civic engagement, but I think it often is. And many of our projects actually function as kind of a convivial interface for people to interact with their food systems in a kind of fun, inspiring, and imaginative way. And I think, again, like Sahra was saying, it's really important to us to try to create an experience for people that is really fun and engaging, because we are often asking them to spend their time with us. So we're constantly always trying to make sure that although we're talking about really serious and kind of sometimes difficult or complex topics, that it is fun, inspiring, engaging, and that whether it's the public or experts, they leave having gained something as well. So the center was started by Zach Denfeld and Kat Kramer in 2010, and I joined them in 2013. There's other people who work in our studio more or less regularly, but then we also collaborate with lots and lots of different people to kind of bring each project to life. So depending on the project, we'll kind of put together a group of experts, whether they're working with chefs or food producers, hackers, journalists, other artists and designers. We'll kind of get a group together to feed in their expertise and their perspectives in order to make a work that's more robust and more thorough and more thoughtful than we would maybe be able to do just on our own. And so really what we study is the organisms and environments that are manipulated by human food cultures. And to do this, this work, we kind of disseminate it in different ways. So we make publications. For example, we have a journal called Food Freaking that's self-published. It's ongoing, and it basically explores the exploitation and exploration of human food systems. But we also often write like a chapter in other books or contribute written pieces to different publications. We also make exhibitions and installations. Sometimes we'll curate an entire exhibition, and sometimes we just make a piece for another show. We make meals and recipes. So this really has to do with the actual kind of materiality of the food, sourcing, preparing, tasting, and debating with the actual material of food in front of us. And finally, we do a lot of labs and workshops, which are more kind of hands-on co-creating with either general public or sometimes a more expert or specialized group of people. Oftentimes, these workshops are really open-ended and are more about experimentation and being together rather than a specific output. And so there's 3 modes that our work often falls into: the analytic, experimental, and fantastic. So there's kind of different categories that we work within these modes, things like critical food design in the analytical, or recombinatorial cuisine is kind of a more experimental, where we're bringing together different ingredients or recipes or people or places and recombining in new ways to kind of see what happens. And then the fantastic speaks more to the future or imagining alter realities. And here we have projects fall into the category of maybe future food cults or speculative agriculture. And so a lot of times the site where these projects, this work, this research happens are these kind of pop-up food carts, or what we call our vehicle fleet. And so over the last 10 years, we've produced a lot of these kind of ranging from like a small furniture to a caravan size food stall. And they're really the site of the interaction. So where people come together to have these experiences. And so recently we created an installation for an exhibition in Eindhoven at Moo Art Space. The piece is called Office, or Welcome to the Office, Other Food Futures, including Cuisine and Ecology. And the installation is kind of a timeline of 10 years of our work, which included some prints and videos, objects. And then there on the inside of this, which you can't really see, is a seating section so that we could host a bunch of events that were partially in person and partially online to kind of have some flexibility given the COVID situation. And this is actually ongoing. We're still going to be running some events. So if you're interested, they're streamed online, and each one has kind of a different topic, and you can join. They're open to the public. And once the Netherlands opens up, and maybe, I think they're in a very heavy lockdown right now, but the idea is that some people will be there sitting in person, and some people can join remotely. And so in the process of creating this installation and going through a lot of our archival work, we really wanted to represent our food cart fleet. And so we ended up making these small kind of 3D models to represent each of the different food carts. I think we had about 12 in the exhibition. And we were thinking, like, the food cart itself is not the artwork or the design, it's more the interaction that happens there that's really important to us. So, but the food cart itself is kind of this kind of emblematic thing that can sum up that larger story, or the activation or the performance that was really time-based and participatory in this space now that was a little bit more static. But in this process, we started thinking more about what these food carts meant. And we've been reading Designs for the Pluriverse by Arturo Escobar. And there's a really nice quote about interfaces. So its ontological structure of design is made up of the interrelations among tool, user, and task or purpose, all of which are brought together by the interface. And so we started thinking, well, that's kind of what our food carts are doing, actually. They're an interface that brings together people, purpose, technology, but also materiality being the food itself, flavors, and the actual ingredients. And so maybe we can start imagining these food carts as an interface for humans to interact with their food systems. So what are these food carts? What do they do? To give you an idea of a few of them, they range from a smog tasting synthesizer to a brinjal or eggplant aubergine seed save and taste test wagon to a spice mix supercomputer that's goal is to blend every combination of spices possible on Earth. And then we have another one called Loki Food Lab, which I'll talk about a little bit more in depth here as kind of an example of how this project and the food cart functions as an interface between people and their food systems. So Loki Food Lab is a traveling food cart for prototyping, serving, and debating a range of bioregional food futures at different sites around the world. Here's a picture of me and Zach in 2014 on the street in Portland, Oregon. This was one of the first times we kind of ran or tested out this project. And we actually just slotted into a normal street fair that was happening and kind of started testing out this idea of bioregional food futures. And so since then, we've done lots of versions ranging from small cart on the side of the street, totally free and open to anyone walking by, to a food caravan parked in Dublin for 3 months, to a food counter installed for 6 months at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. And so I think one success that we've had with this project that we've had to kind of figure out throughout the years is making it scalable, and not just in size, obviously, but also in terms of accessibility, in terms of complexity. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but that the fact that this project was able to kind of be redesigned each time to fit the audience and the context is something that has made it work better for us than other projects. So what's a bioregion? This project is about bioregional food futures. So what is a bioregion? If we imagine right now the planet is broken up between these political borders, which we call nations or even regions within a nation, a bioregion breaks up the map based on ecological boundaries and borders. So things like watersheds or soil or climate or species. And so how can we reimagine space and regions based on ecological boundaries rather than political ones? And how does Loki Food Lab work? We have kind of two versions, a high tech and a low tech, but they're essentially the same thing. You go up to the Loki Food Lab and you're presented with a menu, but the menu, instead of having food items, has lists of attributes or values. And you have to choose 3 that you think a great food system should be. So a great food system should be, and you select 3 of the attributes or can write in your own. But things like efficient, affordable, delicious, open source, nutritious. And from your selection of 3, the computer generates a bite-sized taster, all of ingredients made from ingredients within that bioregion, and with the attributes or the values that you chose. And so some versions of this project have real-time data visualizations and kind of interactive mapping, where you can see where the products have come from within the bioregion. But a huge part of the project is also really starting a conversation about the future of taste, place, ecology, and agriculture amongst the visitors themselves. So of course, we're there, or whoever's hosting it can be speaking with visitors, but really it's also for them to start conversations with each other. We've done this project in lots of different locations. Shows about 10. I think we've actually done more than 10. And essentially, like a really crucial part of this project, in a way that we deal with the issue that Sahra was talking about earlier, is that we always partner with a chef and usually a food researcher based in that area. So we're always trying to kind of find people who really know the bioregion well and can help us to research, learn about, and then source from that specific bioregion. To give 2 examples, here are 2 different tasters from the same set of bioregional ingredients, but recombined in different ways from the Cascadia bioregion. This is in Northwest United States and Canada. This one is the Celtic broadleaf bioregion, which is most of Ireland and part of the UK. And so loki really functions as an interface between humans and their bioregional food systems. And it functions as an interface not just for kind of the visitors that are coming, but also there's this back end that we as the artists and designers think is a really important part of the project for us. So it also assembles food producers. The project also intervenes in supply chains and institutions. This is a huge one. For example, when we worked at the V&A, it was an enormous lift to get the V&A Cafe, who we're collaborating with, to be able to buy from suppliers who were outside of their normal supply chain. And so just doing the work of saying, hey, we really want this specific grain from this specific farm, and all the bureaucracy and negotiations that have to take place to introduce that new item into the supply chain for that specific cafe is a part of the artwork itself as well. This project also puts labor on display. A huge important part of food systems in general is human labor. That is a required part of it, from growing and producing to the preparation of food. And so it puts labor on display in the gallery or on the street, but it also is an important part when we work with the institution to say, hey, this is like a huge cost of this project is actually just the human labor that's required to bring food to people's mouths. The project also coordinates stakeholders. It filters by values rather than in just simple ingredients. And it contributes to social dreaming. So a really important part for us is allowing people to have the space and encouraging and prompting to imagine what other ways can we redesign food systems or tweak it one way or another. And what are our values actually about our food systems, where our food comes from, how it's prepared, how we eat it, and the flavors that it has. So social dreaming. I think that is actually where all I will leave it for now. Thank you so much. Again, my name's Emma Conley, and you can follow us on Instagram or write us an email if you want to join any of the upcoming events that we're going to have in association with the office.
Super, thank you, Emma. And now we have Ruben.
Hello, everybody. So I'm gonna just share the screen. Okay, Katerina, just tell me if you are watching it. And full screen, yes? Okay, cool. So thank you for the invitation, and thank you, Sahra and Emma, for your great sharing so far. My name is Ruben Tudor. I'm a member of Collective Warehouse. It's architecture, art, building, participation, design, and I don't know, a lot of things collective, based in Lisbon, in Portugal. So we start 8 years ago as a bunch of architects and 1 or 2 designers that we were sharing a space for work and for experimentation and for coexistence above all during this university work transition. By the time we start, almost 14 or something like that, and then we've been like evolving, and some members, like I'm now in one of the founders' house that actually is not in the collective anymore. So we've been moving in and moving out, and it's part of our DNA. So as I said, we grew up, or we developed in a way that we were searching for these different practices, and in these 8 years we've been finding out that these different answers that we are looking for, we actually find them in this collectiveness. So in the fact that we have a lot of different people, and we work with a lot of different backgrounds, and that is actually something that we intentionally let it influence our process and our projects. So for us, this is one of our strongest DNA characteristics, I think. That said, we basically work in these three fields that we call the cultural action, the participative architecture, and the practical intervention. So I'm not gonna talk so much about our fields. I'm trying to go a little bit more to the topic. So when Katerina sent us the email to invite us, there was this question there above the civic theme of this conversation. And it said, how can we stimulate feelings and collectiveness, mutual care, and civicness? So our answer is that we don't know the answer. But we know that there are no recipes for these type of things. So we actually try a lot. So we experiment in a lot of different ways. And we've been doing that since the beginning. And we do it with a lot of people, different contexts, different locations, different places, using different tools. Of course, we are always around art and architecture, so it's on that we work. But I think that we go quite far away to look for answers and for tools to use. So going back to the topic, and Emma already said it, like it's nice when we are invited to speak, that normally the ones that invite us give this kind of frame to our work, so it makes us think about it, and that's quite cool for us. So you frame it like the civic or the civicness. So we'll try to show our projects, or to select our projects, going for three civic: the civic activation, the civic education, and the civic emergency. So the civic activation, we feel it as a kind of activation of this civicness of the cities, of the urban spaces. Let's say mostly the public space. It's a field that we work a lot. So I'm going to show you a really small video about this project that we did not last year, but 2 years ago already, in Lisbon, called Portal de Palma. And then I'm going to show another one. So this, do you hear? Yes. Do you hear the sound? No sound. It's a nice music. It's a pity. Well, I can I can just speak it on top of the video. So this was a project that we did in Lisbon. This was like a kind of new public space in a really small houses neighborhood in the middle of Lisbon. And this square was actually rebuilt by the municipality, and they try a kind of a participatory project, but it was actually no participation on it. So of course, after that, the inhabitants they felt quite even worse, because they said that it was they said that it was with their own participation, but actually there was no engagement. So they kind of called us after to kind of gain back a little bit of this relationship with the square. So we work with another artist, Camilla Watson, and we work also with the municipality cultural department, and we call this project, it's called Portal Palma, but it's actually about these collective memories. So what we work was this idea of everybody build again together their collective memory about this space. So actually what you see, this portal, it's made of small stools, wooden stools, and each one of the stools have a picture that was selected by of each of the inhabitants, and all of these pictures are from the surroundings or something like that was happening in this place. So everybody select one picture, we printed it on the stools, we went to the street and we built with them these stools. So every inhabitant have the opportunity to build the stool. Then they all together formed this massive portal. And after 3 weeks there, it was dismantled, and each one of the persons got a stool to their home, and they become these kind of guardians of the portal. So the idea is every time they need to kind of gain back their neighborhood again, they have this piece that they can rebuild and claim it somehow. Then in a completely different perspective, this project, it's called Mons Invisible in Mons in Belgium. That was a collaboration with Construct Lab. It's kind of a collective of collectives that we are part of. And this project was actually during the 2015 European Capital of Culture. There was this kind of abandoned public garden in the city, and the idea was to reactivate this public space and to engage local associations and local people in general, of course, to appropriate the space, to actually live it and to be part of it. So the idea really, it was a really long and complex project, but in resume, the idea was to create, so we all make this kind of first residency. We were there living actually inside, starting with in tents, living this garden. And the idea was to build the kind of base facilities for whatever cultural and local initiatives that could come up from that. So there was an agora, there was a kitchen, there were toilets, there was like small rooms for artistic residents during the next month. There was a playground for kids, there was a sauna. So there was a lot of things. Then actually the inhabitants, they start already during the process to do their own stuff there. So they build, for instance, a pizza oven, a communitary pizza oven. They start to do concerts. There was like, it's nonstop actually. This was almost 6 years ago, and there's still a NGO that they create after that. So for us, that's a really good sign. So there are a lot of activities, and for us, this is part of this civic activation. The playground for kids. It was really, really amazing, this project. So going back to the theme again, so this civic education, somehow we think that a little bit, Emma was talking, and also Sahra, about Sahra was talking about this summer school for kids, and for us, this civic education, it's really pleasant for us to start to work these topics that we normally work with younger people. So one of the projects that we did was actually the last project, this Brincadeira circular playing, whatever translation. It was one of the last projects before the pandemic crisis burst. And this was basically in this school in Lisbon, really young kids school. We thought, okay, let's build, or we were invited to build this kind of tree house somehow, but the main goal was actually to educate kids about this idea of reusing materials, to use materials that are not like super expensive, but that actually you can do something really positive with them. So we collaborate with Macaquinhos Engineers. It is a local association that do these dynamic things for kids. And we start to work around this idea of the circular economy to build this playhouse for them. So this playhouse was actually built using a lot of our own leftovers from other projects that we store in our workshop, and we also collect other materials, for instance, like this Tetra pack that the kids use, so they drink every day the milk in the school. So we collect all of these. We involve also their fathers collecting more. And these Tetra Pak are actually the milk package upside down that we use for the covering of the roof of this building. And actually, the building itself, it was one of the dynamics that Macaquinhos Engineers did. You can see on the top right picture that actually the kids start to do this 3D modeling of this house first. They play a lot with the material, like the wood. Then after, of course, we have to build it ourselves. So kids was a little bit more dangerous and difficult. But the finishing part, they also come up and they treat all the wood. So they were involved in since the beginning to the end. And for us, that was really interesting to have kids doing that with us. So this is the final result of it. It's called Brincadeira Circular, so it's this thing about the economy, circular economy, but with play. And about civic education, another project is something that we also do a lot, is this tutoring for universities. And this was 2016, I think, in Gothenburg. We did two projects there, 2 years with the Chalmers University. But this one particularly for us was quite interesting because the idea was to support this group of students to make this project in this neighborhood. And the idea was to support them in two parts of the process. So one was the construction, the building of this small building, and the other one was to support them in the participative process with the neighbor. This particular neighborhood there in Gothenburg, it's a little bit more complex because it's a neighborhood made essentially for low-income population. It's mostly who live there is mostly refugees, So there's a lot of cultural clash between some of the inter-communities inside this community. So what actually they came up was with this idea of having this place that hosts all of the neighborhoods without being a place made from one specific community or another specific community. So to do that, since the beginning, we start to involve, of course, all of these different actors. Was very interesting because one of the first barriers that we had was actually the language, because they all live in Sweden, in Gothenburg, but they don't speak the same language. So before we start the project itself, the building of this small building there, we actually start by doing these signs in all the languages that was saying, like, join us, come to this open workshop to build this place. We normally say that the construction part becomes like this social moment. So it's something that we use a lot in our projects, is actually the fact that we are there building it ourselves with people. And that actually it's quite an easy way to involve people, because people are passing by. It's not something they impose. And especially Sahra already talked about this confidence that you need time to actually work with people. You cannot just go there, do something and come. So the fact that we are there building it takes time. So that time is actually precious for us to engage with people and to be able to involve them in our projects. So in the end, this was a really, really nice result of this really simple construction thing in the middle of the neighborhood. And it was the first time that actually a lot of these communities came together in the same place, sharing food, for instance. So it's something that we also use a lot. It's like this food, let's eat together, and then we see. And normally this works quite well. And it was the first time that all of these people were actually in a place together without any kind of big complex situation. So in the end, it was very interesting for us to know this. And even the name, it was very interesting that the name of the pavilion, it's now 415 de Pavilion. And this was really interesting because 415 is the postcode there. So they all agree that should go on the name. And pavilion, it's pavilion in Swedish. And then they were saying, but you are now part of our community as well. And you are Portuguese. So how can we put that in the name? And say, no, but this is your thing. It's no, but you are part. So they put the de because it's something that we use a lot in Portugal. So it's funny, like how just a small pavilion in the middle can actually create this if we have the time there. I think it's very, very important, this time there. Then for the civic emergency, we select 3 projects. And we really don't like to use the word emergency because it's quite powerful, and it's quite it puts us in a place. But we think that, I mean, from the projects that we are going to show, I think that everybody is going to get the point of it. So the first one, it was a couple of years ago here in Portugal. There were these massive fires. That was a lot of people that passed away in these fires. It was really, really, really intense, even like for everybody as a country. It was really, really strong. And we were kind of invited really in a rush to take care of this abandoned old school that was a little bit damaged by the fires, but it was abandoned. And they wanted to transform it to the headquarters of the local association for the victims. And this was a little bit strange because it was really in a rush. It was, they invited us and said, okay, the inauguration have to be on Christmas. And this was like 2 or 3 months before. So we were a little bit in a panic. So we just barely prepare the project a little bit. And we team up with more people that we invite, some architects, some artists, some builders. And we moved the office there. So we had this house there in Pedrógão, and we moved the office there. And for a little bit more than a month, I think, we lived there. And we were able to contract like local contractors and builders, and to actually, again, be there, like present. So a lot of the suppliers were local. So this for us was very important. Like if we are going to spend public money to do this public thing, we should do it with these people there. It was already bad that they call us from Lisbon. So we'll try to make it local as we could. So just some pictures, but we invite also a filmmaker called Tiago Moura, and he did this amazing film about it. I'm not going to show you because it's very long. You can see it online, but I'm going to show just a trailer. It's just a little bit, so you don't hear again, right? Damn it. This part was important because there are some voices. Well, if you go to our YouTube channel, Collective Warehouse YouTube channel, you have there this and other videos. This is just a trailer. So this was actually how it was. It was abandoned, and then there was a fire on it. So you could imagine that was not a happy place. And it was really interesting that the fact that we were working there every day, we were going to there was one cafe there. It's really in the middle of nowhere. So we were every day going to this coffee, and people start to ask us why we were there. So we kind of start to show them that we were doing this in this place, in this old school. And all of these elder people, they actually start to have these amazing stories about this school, because more than half of these elder people, they used to go to this school. So it was like 80 years ago. So it was really, really amazing that the topic was not so much on the fires, because it was something that it was very dramatic and intense to them, but it was something kind of these great memories about the school itself. So it was really interesting to have this shift of occupation of the school, but also to have this relationship with the history. And that's why if you see like a lot of the things they have this hexagonal shape on the furniture and stuff that we did, and it was based on this idea of the bees hive, and that somehow have this sense of like community, and this has sense of this one place that is built from and for all of these individuals. So for us, that was a nice concept to work in. Then next project on the civic emergency. This is a really long project. It's a pity that I don't have time to talk about it all, but it's called the Communitary Kitchen in Terras da Costa. It was one of our first projects. And this is bidonville, shantytown. I don't know the name in English. It's a favela in south of a ghetto in south of Lisbon. There were, by the time, there were 500 people living there with no living conditions, no human rights. So there were no sewage, no water, no electricity, no nothing. And they've been living there for around 30 years already. And there was this office that we collaborate a lot. It's called Atelier Mob. And they were already trying to work there, to do something there. And there was already a little bit this idea of building a communitary space, but building a kitchen, because somehow there was already this idea of people who were getting together around food again. And it was also because of the fact that all of these people had to walk more or less 1 kilometer to get water from the public fountain. So if we are going to do a kitchen there, we actually need water for the kitchen. So this was kind of an excuse, using an architectural building as an excuse to bring water closer to people. So this actually starts a little bit like 1 year before, because we were engaged mostly as volunteers, actually, in Casa de Vapor. That was this project nearby, like a cultural project that I'm gonna speak you in the end a little bit more about it, about like this collectiveness around these people and these woods. But that project was dismantling. So there was this woods and this energy of people to do something. So this was kind of a match with the Mob, and we were the people. So this was this idea of Atelier Mob, and there was this energy and these materials of this other project called Casa de Vapor. So this was actually the ignition to this project. So what you see in these pictures was actually the first module. So it was like really simple wooden. You can still see like the color of the previous project. So it was really simple, but this was again very important to claim this space, to claim or to gain the relationship with people there, and also to somehow prove them that we were able to do something, to build, because unfortunately they are quite used to hear possibilities, but then they don't see them actually happening in their own neighborhood. So this was just the beginning, and then in Vols it was just the construction of it was kind of a 1 year process, and in the end we had this full communitary space that actually is quite more than a kitchen. The kitchen, it's just the excuse, but they use it as a gym. They use it as a place to do birthdays. They marry all the people now. Like all the marriages are made there. So it's all the community or meetings. Or even with the municipality, it's like this space works as their own public space, because they didn't have this space as like a common space to receive these kind of dynamics. So in the middle of this picture, you can see Dona Victoria, that was actually the mastermind behind this kitchen that was already working in an informal way in the neighborhood. So we just give it like a building to her idea. And another curiosity, it was that this building, we invite Fernando Guerra. Fernando Guerra is like this high star architectural photographer. It's like one of the biggest in the world. And we invite him like almost in a provocative way, like he just shoot like Frank Gehry, I don't know, museums and stuff, and we invite him to take pictures of these amazing pictures that you are seeing, and he actually said yes, and it was really good to have also this kind of awareness that comes from that explosion. So for us was an important detail as well. Just about what I was talking before, and for us it's something that is really strong on this collectiveness, is that actually that wood and the people that started projects, and actually now the project have different phases. We then work on this diagnosis to rebuild the neighborhood in a different place with all the conditions for the people, but it's still in the process 6 years after. But actually that wood and that collectiveness around the wood and the people, they actually start in 2011 in kind of artistic installation in Guimarães for the European Capital of Culture, and then they went back to get that wood in 2013 to do this cultural project called Casa do Vapor, and then after it was dismantled, they were moved to the ignition of communitary kitchen in Terras. And actually a couple of years ago we still use this kind of energy and around these places and this material to go back to the same place where was Casa do Vapor and kind of make a public space with it. So for us this connection is really, really important in our work, and it's actually the idea of all these collectives that are connected around Europe for us, more or less. Last project, we just put it here because I think it makes sense on this civic emergency. It was something that immediately when the pandemic crisis starts, we were moved into our houses. So so what we work is mostly on public buildings and public spaces with a lot of people, with participation, going to build stuff on the streets, involving and engaging people. And then we were living a moment that was the completely opposite of that. So for us, we had to do something. So we come up with these Agora Live Talks. That was, we invite people from this European network to talk about not so much the pandemic, but to talk about the topics that were being like postponed with the pandemic crisis, and there are still. That is all these rights for the public space, all the difference that come up from the housing rights that are so different from people, and people have to be in their houses now. So it's online, everything, it's open source. And for us, it was a way to answer a little bit, or to look for answers more than answer in this pandemic crisis. So this was some of the, sorry for my face all over, but this was some of the invited collectives and people and studios. Well, thank you. I hope you enjoy. And let's talk.
Super interessante. Yes. So those were 3 really, really interesting presentations. I love how different they were in scope and in tools, but actually all trying to make the most of this, of bringing people together. I think it gave us 3 examples of how art, design, and architecture have a role in bringing us together and try at least to foster feelings of collectiveness and caring and empathy. And it got me thinking, why is it important for people to come together in the first place? And I think you 3 have kind of different agendas or different objectives. So Sahra is more to foster diversity in institutions. Emma maybe more to come up with the future solutions of food systems, and Ruben to deal with urban and social issues. But just to go into the conversation, we don't have that much time. I would like to ask Sahra, or say and then ask. I noticed that in your work there's almost a childlike quality in the work, which I love. I find it super interesting to see the world through children's eyes that in a way haven't been corrupted by many things that we have been. And I wanted to ask you, how do children, the way they see the world inspires your practice? And because I know that you spend a lot of times around kids because of your nephews, cute kids, but yeah, if they have a role in your art, or how does that impact you?
I think it's interesting for you to say that, because I never thought of it that way. That's the first time anyone's ever said that. I guess, I suppose I work with children, but the whole, for me, what I aim to do with my work is try to make it as simple, the gestures as simple as possible. Whether that comes across as childlike, I never really thought about before. But it's more about making it accessible to people. So to kind of strip away the over complicatedness of things in a way, to try and like bring it down to like a gesture of, for example, people coloring in like the White House, for example. That might seem like a child activity, but we all like do that when we're bored. We color in, and there was like this massive thing quite where people were coloring in as a form of stress relief, right? So it's more about making design and art accessible, and sort of keeping that kind of you can do it yourself mentality around it, and to sort of take away, I think, as designers and having been in architecture school, as you would know, Katerina, since we went to the same school, and
Yeah,
there's a lot of talk around it, but there's not much. We're never taught how to actually engage people, and I think engaging people is not. It's more about making it very simple and accessible. So when I work with adults and when I work with children, in a way, I work in the same way, to try and like to try and like strip things down to sort of its most basic elements, I guess. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, and it's a theme that seems to be recurring in this festival. That is seeing the architect, a bit like what Ruben said, seeing the architect as a mediator, and that's something that we don't learn in school. And it also reminds me of something that Emma said, that you guys, I think the three of you, have interventions that are very informal and playful, but it doesn't mean that they're not about serious issues. Like it's more of a language that connects more with people, which I find really interesting. And Emma, I have a question. What does genomic mean?
Genomic relates to all of an organism's genes. So one way that we talk about it is like looking at a plate, from trying to put a food system on a plate, rather than kind of basically rather than breaking things down into separate things, just trying to keep a really holistic and kind of more systems perspective, which takes into consideration that all organisms are kind of interacting with each other in all these different ways.
Yeah, I really like the idea of thinking, that reminds me, of thinking of regions according to their environment and more like of a natural state than of politics. And that it's really clear then what you are trying to do of seeing food as potential to rethink collective identity. And that seems to be a recurring theme also in the work that the center does. Center, right? Center. Genomic.
Yeah. There's something. It's an interesting time right now, and something we've been talking a lot about in the studio is how to kind of deal with localism versus kind of these more nationalistic tendencies. And there's like a real tension there, because in some ways we want more localized food systems and more kind of resilient, kind of networked, where they have relationships, but each has a kind of its own resiliency and autonomy. But on the other hand, taking into consideration the importance of thinking globally and not putting up barriers between one another, and not kind of sliding back into nationalistic tendencies. So yeah, I think that the bioregional kind of concept really helps us think about smaller regions without the nationalistic piece.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and it's really like in all these works that we saw today, they really try to break that down and bring people together that wouldn't normally be together, and like Sahra said, address the elephants in the room and do all those things. Yeah, and I guess Ruben, the work that you guys do, it's interesting. The first and the only time I experienced a structure from Collective Warehouse is on my street. I think I told you on the phone.
The little benches.
Yes, there's an ice cream shop on my street in Lisbon, and I pass by it every day. It's owned by the wife of one of the people who were on this
at Limog.
Yeah, at Limog on the session 1 of this festival, session 2 of this festival, and I didn't know who did it, but I sit there a lot with my son, and we have an ice cream. He doesn't have ice cream; he has the biscuit bit, and it's a real gathering place, and there's and I saw from the rest of your work that you have very similar approach each time of using very simple, accessible materials, but with very playful associations and ways you piece them together. What has been the biggest challenge in these? I mean, this is an interesting question for all of you, but I guess Ruben, you can say maybe
the biggest challenge in this simplifying the language a little bit. You're saying
no, in bringing people together, in bringing people to participate, like people that are wary of you, not giving you so much trust, or people that wouldn't talk with each other normally, maybe. Like, what have been the most awkward? Because this is a potential for awkwardness, you know, when you bring people together. What have been the most?
I would say that
story or
yeah, I would say that I mean, the struggles are a lot, and they differ from situation to situation in whatever context we are in. And of course, if we are working in a favela, it's one thing. If you are working in a urban tissue on a square that was not so participated is a different context, of course. But I think that apart from the fact that we are all people, and that is already complex, one of the, like professionally, one of the biggest difficulties that we have is to, it's actually come from the institutions and the entities, because people don't get that you cannot expect that people trust you and be super active and super productive in 1 week. So, and that is still a struggle. Like a couple of years ago, for us, the biggest struggle was actually to pass this idea that we need to involve people and to make them participate about, for instance, public space and public themes and these kind of things. But now that I think that somehow like local governments and these public entities are already getting that this is an important thing to do, but they still don't get that to do that you need actually to do it in a way that you need to work with people. It's like this idea like, okay, let's involve people, but don't bring people here. It's like either you as a public entity, either you give space and time for people to actually come up with their own ideas and their own issues, and to understand each other, all the actors involved, and then we, after that, you can actually co-build something, or it's not possible. And for us, it's actually one of the biggest problems. It's because there is this idea of participation, but then practically there are no tools or space to, or even resources to actually do that. So for us to work with people, this is one of the biggest problems.
Yeah.
And then I mean, stories we have a lot, but I don't know. I don't know, but I could just say that one of the, Sahra was talking about these simple ways of communicate, and especially that we are talking a lot about architecture. And one of the first kind of clash that we had on that was in one of our first projects. We print this huge plan view of the neighborhood for people to work around and to start to put their own inputs to the process. And we were feeling that nobody was actually bringing anything, and we were not understanding why. And after a while, we got it, because people, they are not used to read plan drawings, 2D drawings seen from above, actually, even in a huge scale of a neighborhood. So for us, that it's really easy to read that there's a street, there's a building, there's something like that. But for people, that's, I mean, it's not their language. So actually, if you want people to be active and to participate in the things, you have to actually speak a language that is common to everybody. And for us, this was a very important learning by that time. Yeah, and I think that you can see it in our process now, and also in some of the results. Actually, the buildings themselves, they are quite simple in a way. They are not super technological. They are easy to read, easy to build, easy to use, and that's, for us, it's also important if you want to engage people.
Yeah. I think it's super interesting, because human beings are not predictable species. We are, and especially a group of human beings, there's an element of unpredictability and feelings, emotion that you can't, you can't. It's not a mathematical equation like maybe institutions wish it was, you know, you allocate money and you get more engagement and that's all accounted for, but it's very difficult. It's not the reality. We have a question from Soraya Fernandes, and that we are kind of running out of time, but I would just like to go on a bit more. And I think this is a bit more for Emma. Her question is, how do you work your approach depending on people's cultures when you talk about the way of interacting, of building and food systems? I guess it's a question for all, but I can ask to Emma, for example.
Yeah, I think we could all answer this. Maybe the other two could even answer it with more depth than me. I think, yeah, I mean, we have really basic cultural differences. For example, when we do a project in the United States, everybody wants to participate. You do a project in another country where people are maybe more withdrawn. Like we do a lot of work also in Norway. It can be harder to get people to participate just based on cultural norms. And I think we often don't have long amounts of time to spend, and they are shorter projects a lot of times. And so I think a large, we rely really heavily on what I like to call our handlers, but basically the host, whoever's invited us to participate. Usually there's a team there of people who are really embedded in the community and who are running either the institution or the festival or whatever it is. And those people, I really, really heavily rely on them for cultural navigation. Like we were doing a short-term project in Goa a couple of years ago. And we had a small team of people helping. And I was like, I know how the project goes, but you guys need to lead this and help me through it, because you know this is your community. This is I want them to get as much out of it as possible. I'm more of, as you're saying before, like the person in between, or bringing a project idea or a concept for all of us to kind of play with together. But I really, over the years, have formed short-term but very close bonds with those hosting institutions, specifically because they help navigate the kind of cultural differences and the obvious logistical ones too, but the cultural ones are run really deep. So yeah, that's not a great answer to that question, but so
it's interesting. It's I don't know, Sahra and Ruben, if you have any counter comments. But I think in the light of the pandemic currently, I think this work that you guys are doing is even more important. And I don't know if it's just my assessment, but in my view, humans are social beings, and at least I'm having a craving to gather. So it's really important to have these works and mechanisms and tools and art that might spark conversations and might address things. And it's like Sahra said, every little, I was about to say the Waitrose slogan, every little helps. What is it, Waitrose? It's a supermarket in the UK. But
yeah, Tesco's.
Tesco's, oh my God. But like I think a lot about it as well. Like there's so many problems in the world. How can we fix them? And I think it's really inspiring to see works like you guys that are as small as a print handout, from that to, a pop-up installation or a whole museum. So do our little part in, improving the world and making positive change. And maybe on that positive note, we could end our session. And I wanted to thank Sahra, Emma, and Ruben for their presentations. And also remind people that we will have our last session on Friday, and it will be about tactical urbanism, which is also a little bit relating to what we've discussed here today. I think you guys also do some tactical urbanism. But yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and see you soon.
Thank you, Katarina.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sahra.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Emma.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.